Right now, some of you are going through hell. It's not just like a low point in your life, it's like the lowest point in your life. And it is impacting everything. You can't sleep. You don't want to go to work. You're not up for romance. Everything is just crashing down because there's so much pain that needs to be dealt with. And when we're dealing with a lot of pain, we start to make poor decisions. So when Christians come up in the name of Jesus, while we're dealing with all this pain and we're just looking at the outside of what they're doing, we're like, yo, you got to cut that out. Like, we don't get down to all the pain in the background. And then the person just feels attacked because all the pain in the background is the stuff that's causing the poor decisions in that moment. We don't know what's going on in everybody's lives. All right, as one naturally does after they go on a vacation. Today I'm just showing you a slideshow. No, I'm just kidding. That was a slideshow of all my vacation pictures. Wouldn't that be fun? It would mostly just be fish and chips. So there's that. We are hopping back into the Sermon on the Mount. Today we find ourselves in Matthew 7, breaking into another chapter here where Jesus talks about judgment. And because the church is so judgy, you'd be expecting him to be like, anytime you see a sin in somebody, you better call it out, gosh dang it. Except he does the exact opposite. The church does not often look like the teaching of Jesus. And judgment is a little bit of a complicated issue, and we'll kind of get into some of the reasons as to why that is, but let's take a look first at what Jesus says. Matthew 7, 1 through 5, I'm reading the ESV, if that's helpful for you. It's up on the screen. Judge not, that you be not judged. Oh no, I don't have all the fonts on there, so it gets cut off. Well, this is going to be awkward. Let me pull up the rest of the passage. This is my fault. This is what happens when you try to be fancy about your PowerPoints. You don't install all your fonts the right way, and then they get too big. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. This passage right here, Jesus calls us not to judge others, but instead to take care of ourselves, because we all have something lodged in our eye. The cartoon that Jesus has just drawn for us is some doofus walking around with a tree sticking out of his eye, but he sees a piece of wood dust in someone else's eye. He's like, oh, let me get that for you. Bonk, bonk. Everywhere he turns, he's hitting people in the face. Like, it's a funny cartoon. Jesus is using some humor. It feels like it gets intense because he's like, you hypocrites. But what that word meant in Jesus' time is like a play actor. Like, stop pretending. Stop acting like there's nothing that you're dealing with so that you can deal with other people's stuff. You got to deal with your own stuff first. And so when Jesus calls us to judge not, he's teaching us a way to get into people's lives that are actually going to cause them to have substantial change. I don't know about you, but have you ever had someone come up to you and be like, yo, there's some things in your life I got to change, and here's what I want you to do? Like, has that worked for you? Maybe in some really, really intense situations where you have like a whole community gather around and you have one of those confrontations. What are those called? I just forgot the word. Intervention. When you have an intervention and you're all like on the same page, like, hey, we gotta call attention to this because it's really damaging. But a lot of times when people just kind of approach you with like, here's a bunch of judgment on you, doesn't usually work. It usually just kind of hardens you even more so. And I can think of a number of times in which I've done that to people. And then I've never seen them again. Because I crossed the line of what was appropriate within our relationship to know how to meet them on their space, their level, their turf. One of the things I've learned in pastoring over time is that we all have logs in our eyes. And there are some things where you might be able to identify it for someone, but they're not ready for it to be pulled out. And so you take your time to just love the person in front of you. And when Jesus maybe coaches you along the way to be like, hey, maybe now it's time to kind of get in these conversations, you're in a much healthier space. Whereas when we come in with religion, like the Pharisees, are just like, I don't like something, I got to call it out. I'm ready to just pull this out of you. Like we miss again the hypocrisy that we have something big to deal with ourselves, and we're dealing with the speck with someone else's. See, when we start judging, we miss that there's a lot of context to a person. Right now, every single person in this room has a whole lot of baggage, has a whole lot of background of stuff that is telling a narrative around their life. Right now, some of you are going through hell. It's not just like a low point in your life, it's like the lowest point in your life. And it is impacting everything. You can't sleep. You don't want to go to work. You're not up for romance. Everything is just crashing down because there's so much pain that needs to be dealt with. And when we're dealing with a lot of pain, we start to make poor decisions. So when Christians come up in the name of Jesus, while we're dealing with all this pain and we're just looking at the outside of what they're doing, we're like, yo, you got to cut that out. Like we don't get down to all the pain in the background. And then the person just feels attacked because all the pain in the background is the stuff that's causing the poor decisions in that moment. We don't know what's going on in everybody's lives.
At 1208 Greenwood, we're more than just a church. We're a family growing together in faith, both in person and online. From our original worship music to biblical teaching, which you can access anywhere, we're creating authentic experiences every day. Your giving helps keep our ministries running and creates impactful content and music that reaches people wherever they are. Join our mission to serve and grow. Support 1208 Greenwood today. The link is in the description.
Screw this PowerPoint. That's not and nothing that's in the PowerPoint is going to come through because all the text is messed up. So let's just put up a nice little picture. Thank you. I appreciate that. I like the feedback. There you go. Judge not. We'll just leave that up on the screen. We don't always know what's going on in people's lives. So, for example, I remember this one time, me and my wife went to pastor spouse retreat, something that our particular denomination conference sponsors. Everybody goes to Frankenmuth once a year. And we get there, and while we're there, I'm like getting ready for bed, and I'm a part of a group text, and someone in the group text, like, it is snowing like crazy where they're at. And they talk about how much snow they have. And then they send a picture in the group where they have tried to start like the snow plow blower thingy, whatever, you know what I'm talking about? They pull the thing, but when they pull it, it snaps off. And so now they can't plow the snow. And I thought this was a joke. Like we're all like, ha ha, funny. So I was like, I don't care who you are. That's funny. To which they exploded at me. How could I think this is funny? To which I exploded at them. Meanwhile, lots of other people in the group chat are watching us fight until they're finally like, hey, can you guys cut it out? This is ridiculous. What I didn't understand at that moment was whatever baggage was making this not funny for them. What they didn't understand when I lashed out at them is 3 hours ago, I had found out that we were having a miscarriage. And I had to go to a retreat and pretend like nothing was happening, lest every single person there hunt me down to talk to me about it. Which maybe that's helpful sometimes, but it's not what felt helpful to me in that moment. Why did Jamin lash out in the group chat? Because he didn't have time to feel like he had completely misread the situation. He was dealing with all of his own crap behind that. How often, when people lash out at us, are we unaware of the deep pain that's there? Because we all have that pain. How often do we misjudge, not understanding the fullness of what's actually going on in people's lives? For example, sometimes people will come down on others and judge them for obesity. I get it. Health is important and all that. But do you know that bodies can become obese for more reasons than just eating? For example, if you starve yourself, which people will do usually because of great pain and trauma, if you starve yourself, you will start to, your body will start pulling all the calories that it can and turn it into fat in order to store up fat so the body can eat that because you're not eating. Now, when you come alongside someone, you're like, hey, we need to go to the gym. That's actually not going to fix anything. Your judgment on them goes straight to you're eating too much, when in fact the pain is something traumatic that they need help getting out of. I read a whole book once, and I hope this fact was true, but the book never really said for sure is what the whole book was based off of. I read a whole book once that apparently you can get scratched by a chicken and that can make you fat. I don't know, some kind of virus that you can get from a chicken scratch that can make your body fat. So if you go up to somebody who's been chicken scratched, you're like, man, you just really need to work out and you need to eat less. Bro, it was a chicken. This wasn't a moral thing. This was some chicken's fault. But when we don't know the full context and we just become judgy over people, again, we miss the point. And how often have I sat down with people to have a conversation that I was not aware of all the context that was going on in the background and all the pain that was causing it? How often when I assessed what I thought was the issue, did people never want to talk to me again? Or did people leave the church? There are many things in the past that I wish I could do differently, knowing what I know now. When I do inner healing with people, oftentimes the Holy Spirit will bring something to their mind. Here's some pain I want you to talk about. And the person will be like, I really don't want to talk about that. And my response these days is not like, well, we got to figure it out so we're going to get through all this stuff and heal. It's just like, hey, look, it's up to you. The Holy Spirit's telling you that it seems like a good thing to talk about. I assume that means he also trusts me to help work it through with you. But this is your stuff. I'm not going to drag it out of you. I'll meet you where you're at, love you how you are. And if you want to talk about it when you're ready, let's talk about it. And I think almost 100% of the time, people have just been like, okay, I'll talk about it. That's a very different approach than trying to yank things out of people. You don't know what's going on in other people's lives. So when you judge, you are stepping into a territory that you do not have the knowledge to assess. But guess who does have the knowledge to assess it? The classic answer is okay. Anybody? Yeah, that's the one. An omniscient God is a perfect judge. A meticulous God who knows every detail about every last situation on this planet and in your life is the perfect judge. He's accounting for all the variables that you are not. And he is far more merciful on us than we often are. There's a classic comic strip that I just love the point that it's trying to make, but Peter's at the gates of heaven and people are trying to line up to get in, and Peter's like checking people out, checking people into heaven. And they're like, where's Jesus? Like, why isn't he running this? And then you see Jesus, like in the comic, he's in the background sneaking people over the gate. Trying to get them in. He's far more merciful than us, and he knows far more of the details. C.S. Lewis once wondered, like, what if we get to heaven and we find out that we sinned way less than we thought we did? Because God took into account all the variables that caused all the things that we did. There's so many variables. So many variables. We know that people that grow up in broken households are going to end up carrying a lot of the same brokenness in their own life. You might look at a heroin addict and just be like, oh, they just can't break free. Why don't they just stop? They could stop if they really wanted to. No, they can't. That's not how it works. That's a log in your own eye to not know how heroin works. Maybe they were just a kid at a party and they made a stupid decision that night to try it. And that stupid decision that a 12-year-old made has now impacted the rest of their life by altering the chemistry of their brain. They want out. They can't get out. And getting out can be dangerous. And they need help to figure it out. But will anyone meet them in that space? Or will we hear the horrible things that people have tossed around about, like, well, if they die, then maybe we're just better without that dissonance in the community? What a horrible thing to think. That's judgment. A few years back, I started with some doctors. We founded Jackson Harm Reduction here in the community. We recently gave it to House of New Beginnings after we changed laws in Jackson. They happily took it. We just had to do the hot topic stuff. But the whole point of it was trying to meet people where they're at. We know that you can't stop using. We don't want you to use, but we're going to give you clean needles so you don't kill yourself while you're using. And also, if you ever want to find recovery and get out of this mess, just talk to us and we'll try to help you walk that distance. That was an attempt to meet people with understanding, not to judge them, and to help them to freedom. And since we started that, now a recovery house owns it. And some people have gotten freedom because we met them where they were at and they left drugs behind. Will you meet people where they're at? Or will you just judge them? Will you think to yourself, there's a healed version of that person that is good for me and the rest of this world? Or will you think, well, if drugs take them, like that wouldn't be the worst thing? One of these thoughts is like Jesus, who came to bring life and life abundant. And the other thought is like Satan, which seeks to kill and destroy. In many ways, Greg Boyd proposes that judgment is the original sin. That the thing that messed up the world is we took a fruit that represented the knowledge of good and evil. We weren't ready for it. And by partaking of it, we now judge what is good and right and what is evil and wrong. We step into something that we don't understand. Something that God can teach us with wisdom if we pursue him. But when we operate out of this knowledge that we've taken ourselves, we're just too confused to get it all. Judgment is a dangerous path. It leads to a lot of other variables that can go really, really wrong. It's a classic story in the Bible. Everybody in Israel has moved into Israel, and they've got they've got a bunch of different lands that they can move into. And there's one particular group of Israelites that move into their land and then start to create their own kind of worship center. Now, this is not like we have today where there's a bunch of church buildings that represent the church. In this time, there was one tabernacle. There was one space where God was, and everybody in Israel was supposed to go to this space. But in this particular time, there was one clan that decided to build their own tabernacle. And when the rest of the tribes of Israel saw that they were doing this, they flipped out and they got together and they started gossiping and they said, why do you think they're doing this? What are we going to do about it? We got to do something about it. This is messed up. This is heresy. So you know what they did? They prepared for war. Step one would have been ask them what's up. But instead they just jumped to, we should probably kill them, right? Fortunately, a conversation is had before they do that. And when they listen to this tribe as to why they built their own tabernacle, they learn something. This tribe is separated by a river in the land geographically. And they're a little nervous that the rest of Israel is going to kind of consider them outcasts because they're not like exactly in the land. They're kind of divided. And just geographically, it's going to kind of turn them into minorities around this space. So they wanted to build their own kind of space that was just an echo that they belonged with everybody else. It was just a sign that they belonged with everybody else. And Israel's like, oh, okay, our bad. Never mind. We won't kill you. Look what happened through gossip, through sharing these stories around and whispering into people's ears. You know that's what got Jesus killed? We always think to ourselves, well, if there's a giant crowd that's on the same page, they must be right. That's mob mentality. It is mobs that martyred people all throughout history. It's mobs that killed Jesus. Well, they're all thinking the same thing. How could they be wrong? Because they had Pharisees in their ears saying, that guy's a sinner, that guy's messed up. Who had demons in their ears, whispering all kinds of lies to them. Until all of this grew to the point that people are putting an innocent man on wooden beams who's already in great pain because he's bled through his forehead, which has caused all of his nerves to be on overload. That's what judgment does. And they were wrong. And the only person in that moment who actually could judge the scenario was dead. There's another story kind of like it where Paul ends up getting in trouble. There's a guy who's been upset because Paul's been preaching this gospel and it's kind of messing with his business because his job is to more or less carve more gods and things like that. Well, this guy's taking all the gods away, so he's taking his business away. He gets mad, starts confronting Paul, and then a crowd starts raising up, but they don't fully know what they're arguing about until finally Paul's like taken to a big center where everybody's yelling and screaming, and the Bible has this kind of funny point where it's like nobody actually knew why they were there. Nobody knew what they were yelling and screaming about. Nobody knew what they were fighting about. It was just judgment that turned into gossip, that turned into fire of a mob that no longer knew the purpose as to what they were doing. Just kill that guy so everything will be better. Sounds very familiar to American politics these days. If we could just pin all of America's classic sins on immigrants and kick them out of the country, then we'd be okay. Log in your eye. We often justify our judgment, though. How often do we consider it a spiritual gift of discernment? There have been times where people have come up to me after service to be like, hey, there's somebody in here. I just get real bad vibes off of them. I think you should pay attention to them. They might be abusive. I'm like, I don't, what, how does that work? Like, okay, I'll pay attention to it, especially if you've experienced abuse yourself, then I maybe you picked up on something. But a lot of times when people are telling me that kind of stuff, it's like a spiritual vibe. So Jesus is just telling you how to judge strangers you don't know. Your brain does that already. When you see someone, your brain within, I think it's microseconds, tries to tell your rest of your body if a person on the street is safe or not. So you already have to fight against the very science of who you are because your body's always trying to say, am I safe? And if you catch a certain wrinkle in someone's face, your brain may process that to say, no, you're not. So you already have to fight against your own body to not judge. And you have to be careful that when you have a spiritual sense that you should judge someone, that you're not just giving into the wavelengths of your brain, among other things. Now, this is all kind of a strange message coming from me because my master's is in theology and social justice. I'm the annoying social justice warrior online that everybody thinks is super judgmental and wonders why he won't just shut up about all the things that are wrong in the world. I get that. How can I come along and then suddenly be like, don't judge anybody? You remember how Jesus' message ends? Take the log out of your own eye, and then you can clearly see to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Jesus understands that there is injustice in the world. Jesus is the judge. In Revelation, he's pictured as though his tongue is a sword. That is, his words are final, his judgments are true. So, like, it's not that judgment does not exist in some way, or that justice does not exist in some way. The church is actually in really dangerous scenarios if we have no form of justice or judgment. She's not here today, but our own Amity keeps blowing up on TikTok while she's preaching. And the big message that's pulling her together for a lot of people is Christians who have kind of run away from the church because they felt judged, or Christians who have run away because they felt that the church didn't care about justice. And they were just fine with things going on. And so as she's giving this call for the church to be what it is, there are lots of people who have deconstructed from Christianity starting to come back in her comments are like, I think I want this Jesus guy. I haven't heard anyone stand up for me before in the way in which I've been judged. I haven't heard anyone speak back about the things that the church has done wrong. And it's healing for me to hear that the church is doing wrong sometimes. C.S. Lewis himself said, if the book, which I am never going to write, is ever written, it will be a full disclosure of everything that the church has done wrong. Because who's going to listen to us if we don't confess? So, like, there is space, of course, for justice and judgment. The church is dangerous when it tries to cover stuff up. Church is dangerous when it forgives in a way that does not hold people to account. Church is dangerous if somebody in the church has oppressed someone else in the church horribly, and then you just let both people stay within your building. Like, there's other spaces for one to go. So yes, there is space to be appropriately aiming for justice and asking God to help bring about the appropriate judgment. An example would be when Paul did this. Paul did this to the church in Corinth because some guy was sleeping with his stepmom and everybody was kind of laughing about it or even celebrating it. And Paul's like, guys, even the pagans don't do that. And you guys are celebrating it? You got to turn that guy over to Satan in hopes to save his soul. Which is a really weird statement to make. But what Paul was getting at is right now he's in the safety of God's presence in God's church, and he's not feeling the weight of his sin. So turn him over to Satan where sin belongs. And when he is with the weight of his sin, he will suddenly repent and be like, I don't want this. Okay, I'll stop. I'll stop doing what I was doing. I want to come back. Now, that was a very severe reaction that, not reaction. It was a severe step that Paul took. But it's possible in his particular situation that it was wisdom, because the guy was seemingly unrepentant. And in 2 Corinthians, there is a passage where Paul is telling them to welcome someone back into the church. And it could be that guy. It could be that guy where Paul's like, okay, he feels the weight of his sin. He wants to come back. Let him in. Show him some grace. Show him some love. Most often when we are stepping into those spaces where judgment or justice feels appropriate, it's because the people around us are unrepentant and they're continuing to hurt, and it has to be addressed in some way. In the same way when we started, you might find yourself in that word again, intervention. I don't know why I keep forgetting that word. But there might be times where you have to do what even Brennan Manning talked about. You might have to find tough love. But if you find yourself drawn to that as your immediate answer or your constant answer, you're going to hurt people. And you're probably not catching the log in your own eye. Let me close out by reminding us as the band comes up that the church is for the oppressors too. Again, my master's is focused on the Bible and social justice. I've ended up in that space in part because I've worked with so many people in inner healing and worked with so many minorities that have faced oppression, that I want to know how to help those better who are oppressed. And I want to know what the Bible has to say about it. But you have to heal the oppressors too. You want domestic abuse to stop? Then you can't just help the person who's been abused heal. You have to also lead the abuser into healing as well. You want drugs to stop? And you can't just help those who are experiencing the weight of drugs. You got to love the drug lords. You want violence to stop? Then your heart can't just be for the person who was shot and killed, but your heart simultaneously has to be for the person who shot and killed them. And this is how you live into a space that judges not. Because if Jesus can be murdered on a cross in the most violent way imaginable and still say, while he's there, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, and still lay down his life, not just for the people who are crying that he's on the cross, but for the people who are mocking him at his feet, then I have some good, bad news for the rest of us. We have to do the same. When you love your enemies, you are fighting against your own judgment. I just was watching a TV show on the plane on the way back, and there was just a scene where someone forgave someone for drunk driving and killing their mom during that while they were out driving. And just watching the person, after feeling so much pain, say, I forgive you, like I felt my heart leap out of my chest. What a different story we could tell if instead of judging, we just chose to love. Not just the oppressed, but the oppressor. Why? Because though all of you have been oppressed, all of you have also oppressed someone. We know what it's like from both sides. So we're going to close with a song that just reminds us that we can be raw and honest with God. And it might be the pain that you're feeling right now that has overwhelmed you in some way. That is, maybe you're lashing out at others because of that pain. Or maybe you just need to be honest with God. God, I've become aware that I've been hurting people, and I need help to stop. Please forgive me and help me move forward. Whatever the case, God is ready to hear it all. God works with repentant hearts. King Manasseh in the Old Testament, the worst king that Israel ever had. He was so bad that he's the reason, the final straw as to why God exiled all of Israel. And yet, the Hitler of their time, the worst king of their time, when he was taken prisoner by his enemies, he repented. And God forgave him. And then he returned home and did some of the most 180 that any king in the Old Testament ever did. He tried his best to serve God after being the most violently oppressive, worst king of all time. And he changed the story. That is always space available to all of us. So as you bring your heart to God, wherever it might be, Manasseh reminds us that God will meet us where we're at and help us heal.
Green. Well, always green with the